The punch landed with a sickening crack that echoed off the brownstone buildings. Blood bloomed on her lip, dark crimson against brown skin, and the crowd gasped as one living thing. But she didn't fall. She didn't scream. She just looked at him. Detective Kyle Brener's fist was still raised, knuckles split and trembling when he saw something in Alisa Monroe's eyes that made his bladder weak. Not rage, not fear. Something worse. Something that whispered, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Stay with me till the end of this story, and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this truth travels." The morning started like every Tuesday in the Grant Heights neighborhood coffee shop lines, snaking onto sidewalks, bus breaks, hissing at corners. Somebody's car alarm, crying wolf again. Normal. Forgettable. The kind of ordinary that dies the second violence arrives. Alisa Monroe had been walking to the community center where she volunteered a canvas bag of donated books slung over her shoulder when the cruiser jumped the curb. No lights. No siren. Just the sudden scream of tires and the smell of burning rubber as the police car mounted the sidewalk like a predator lunging. She stopped. The crowd scattered, mothers yanking children, a teenager dropping his skateboard, an old man with a cane freezing mid-step. But Alisa didn't move. She stood there, one hand still on her bag strap, watching as the cruiser door flew open and Detective Kyle Brener emerged like something rabid. "You?" His voice cracked with that particular rage, the kind marinated in resentment and bad coffee and 20 years of unchecked authority. "Don't you fucking move!" Alisa set her bag down slowly, carefully. Her movements had the eerie precision of someone defusing a bomb. "Officer," she said, her voice steady as stone. "I'm just walking to—" "Shut your mouths." Kyle was already closing the distance. His hand on his belt fingers twitching between his gun and his baton, like he couldn't decide which would feel better. "I've been watching you. Watching your kind. You think you can just walk around here like you own the place?" The crowd had stopped scattering. People were pulling out phones now, that instinct of the modern age, document everything, because the truth only exists if it's recorded. "I'm not looking for trouble," Alisa said. Too late. Kyle's face was red, veins bulging in his neck. "You're in violation of..." He was searching for something, anything, his eyes wild. "Loitering public disturbance. I'm walking to the community center." "Walking while black, more like it," someone muttered from the crowd. Kyle's head snapped toward the voice. "Who said that? Who the fuck said that?" Nobody answered. But everyone was filming now. Dozens of phones pointed at them like accusatory fingers. "Put your hands behind your back," Kyle commanded, pulling out his cuffs with hands that shook not from fear, but from anticipation. This was the part he liked. The control. The submission. Alisa didn't move. "I said hands behind your back." "No." The word hung in the air like a blade. Simple. Final. Kyle's face went from red to purple. "What did you just say to me?" "I said no." Alisa's voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something that made the crowd lean in despite themselves. "I haven't broken any laws. I'm not resisting arrest because there's no lawful reason to arrest me. I'm simply standing here." "You're resisting right now. I'm witnessing it. You're witnessing a woman standing still." That's when Kyle snapped. The punch came fast, a right hook that had all his weight behind it, all his rage, all those years of getting away with it. It caught Alisa on the left side of her face, spinning her head to the side, splitting her lip open. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. A woman covered her child's eyes too late. But Alisa didn't fall. She turned her head back, slowly, blood now running down her chin, and she looked at Kyle Brener. Just looked at him. Her eyes were dark and bottomless, and completely, terrifyingly calm. Kyle stumbled back, his fist still raised, suddenly aware of what he'd done. His breathing was ragged, panicked. You made me do that. You were resisting. Everyone saw it. But nobody was agreeing with him. The crowd had gone silent in that awful way, the silence that comes before judgment. "I'm not resisting," Alisa said again, and she raised her hands slowly, palms out, showing them empty. Blood dripped from her lip onto her white blouse, spreading like a Rorschach test. "I'm just standing here." Kyle grabbed for his radio, nearly dropping it. "This is Detective Brener, badge 4729. I need backup at Grant, and fifth suspect is what?" Alisa asked quietly. "Standing." His partner, Officer Marcus Webb, had been in the cruiser the whole time, and now he emerged slowly, his face gray. "Kyle, man, what the hell are you doing?" She resisted. "She's just standing there. Kyle spun back to Alisa, desperate now. "What's your name? Give me your ID." Alisa reached slowly into her jacket pocket. Every movement was deliberate, visible, designed to give no excuse for escalation. She pulled out a driver's license and held it up. Kyle snatched it from her hand, his eyes scanning it frantically. "Alisa Monroe. Alisa Monroe." He was muttering it like an incantation, already reaching for his phone, already running the name through the system. This was where it always went. You run the name, find the warrants, justify the violence retroactively. The system protected its own. Kyle's phone buzzed, once, twice. His face went from purple to white. "What?" Marcus moved closer, trying to see the screen. "What does it say?" Kyle's hands were shaking so hard now the phone rattled. It says there's no record." "No record, like no priors." No record, no anything." Kyle's voice climbed higher. "It's showing an error. It's routing to..." His eyes went huge. "It's routing to fucking Langley." Marcus froze. "Langley, Kyle, that's..." "I know what Langley is." Kyle was stabbing at his phone now, trying different searches, different databases. Every single one came back the same error. Refer to Central Intelligence Agency. Alisa still hadn't moved. Blood still dripped from her lip. She was still just looking at him. "Call it in," Marcus whispered. "Call it in right now." Kyle's hands were shaking so badly he could barely dial. It rang twice before their commanding officer, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, picked up. "This better be good, Brener." "Lieutenant, I need you to run a name for me. Alisa Monroe. Alisamonroe. There was silence on the other end. Then, "Where are you right now?" "Grant and Fifth. I've got a suspect who..." "What did you do?" Chen's voice went sharp. She was resisting, and I had to..." "What did you do, Kyle?" I may have used necessary force to..." The line went dead. 30 seconds later, Chen called back. Kyle could hear her breathing hard like she'd been running. "Kyle, listen to me very carefully. I just tried to run that name. It bounced me to Langley. It bounced me to a secure line. A very, very secure line. The kind of line that has 3 confirmations and a voice authentication before it even rings. The kind of line that made my computer flash red." Kyle's gun hand was trembling now. "What does that mean?" "It means you fucked up. It means you fucked up so bad I can't even see the bottom of it. Where is she now?" "She's right here. She's just standing here." "Did you touch her?" "Kyle, tell me you didn't touch her." The silence was answer enough. "Jesus Christ." Chen's voice dropped to a whisper. "Kyle, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I want you to put your phone down. I want you to step away from her. I want you to get in your car and drive straight to the precinct. Do not pass go. Do not talk to anyone. Do you understand me?" "But do you understand me?" Kyle lowered the phone slowly. He looked at Alisa, who was still standing there, still bleeding, still watching him with those calm, terrible eyes. His voice broke. "I'm sorry. I know what you thought," Alisa said softly. "You thought I was nobody. You thought I was someone you could hurt because you've been hurting people like me your whole career and nothing ever happened to you. I didn't? You did. She took a step forward. Just one. Kyle and Marcus both flinched back like she'd pulled a weapon. And now you're going to find out what happens when you hurt somebody. Are you threatening me? Kyle's voice climbed to a squeak. No. Alisa wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand, looked at it, then looked back at him. I don't need to threaten you. I don't need to do anything at all. You already did it to yourself. 3 more cruisers arrived. Then lights blazing, and Lieutenant Chen emerged from the lead car moving fast. She was a small woman, Chinese-American, with gray, streaking her black hair and eyes that had seen too much bullshit. She stopped dead when she saw Alisa's bloody face. Oh, Kyle. It came out like a prayer, like a eulogy. Oh, you stupid, stupid man. Lieutenant, I can explain. Shut up. Chen turned to Alisa, and something in her posture changed. She wasn't quite standing at attention, but it was close, respectful, cautious. Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Sarah Chen. Are you injured? Do you need medical attention? No, Alisa said. The footage shows Detective Brener struck you. Yes. Will you be pressing charges? Alisa tilted her head slightly, considering. The crowd had grown now 50-60 people, all filming, all watching. No. Chen blinked. Ma'am, I said no. I won't be pressing charges. But, Lieutenant Chen. Alisa's voice was gentle, almost kind. I'm not going to press charges because I don't need to. Detective Brener has already set something in motion that he can't stop. Charges would be redundant. Kyle felt his bowels turn to water. What does that mean? What the fuck does that mean? Chen rounded on him. It means you need to shut your mouth before you make this worse. Get in my car. Now. I have rights, I have. You have the right to shut the fuck up and get in my car before I arrest you myself for gross stupidity. Chen's voice cracked like a whip. Move. Kyle moved. But as he walked toward Chen's cruiser, he couldn't stop looking back at Alisa. She was still standing there in the same spot, blood drying on her face, her expression serene. One of the crowd members, an old black woman with white hair and kind eyes, approached her slowly. Baby, you need to sit down. You need ice for that lip. I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. The old woman blinked. You know my name. I volunteer at the center. You bring cookies every Thursday. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. He hit you. That man hit you for nothing. Not for nothing. Alisa's smile was sad. He hit me because he's been waiting his whole life to hit someone like me and get away with it. He hit me because the system told him he could. He hit me because nobody ever taught him that there are some people you don't touch. And you're one of those people. I'm one of those people. Another voice from the crowd, a young man with locks and a recording phone. I got it all, every second. You want me to send it to the news? No, Alisa said. But, not yet. She looked at him, and he felt it, that weight of her attention, like being seen for the first time in his life. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus Brown. Marcus Brown, I need you to keep that video safe. Don't upload it. Don't share it. Not yet. When the time comes, you'll know. How will I know? You'll know. She picked up her bag of books. Now I need to go. The kids at the center are waiting for story time. She walked away, then just walked away, leaving the crowd murmuring, leaving the police standing there looking lost, leaving Kyle Brener sitting in the back of Chen's cruiser with his head in his hands. Mrs. Patterson watched her go. Lord have mercy, she whispered. That girl ain't human. She's something else entirely. She's something all right, Marcus Brown said, still recording. Something that cop's gonna wish he never met. Back at the precinct, Chen threw her phone across her office. It hit the wall and cracked, but she didn't care. Captain Raymond Morris stood in the doorway, his face grave. "Tell me it's not as bad as I think it is," he said. "It's worse." Chen pulled up the database on her computer, turned the monitor so Morris could see the error message. "I ran her name through every system we have. Local, state, federal. Every single one routes to Langley. Do you know what that means? Black Ops. Not just Black Ops. Phoenix level." Morris went pale. Phoenix program was a ghost story in law enforcement, a whispered legend about operatives so deep in the shadow world that they didn't officially exist. Agents trained to destabilize governments, eliminate threats that conventional military couldn't touch, operate in places that would trigger international incidents if anyone knew the U.S. was there. You're telling me Brener just punched a Phoenix operative in the face on a public street? I'm telling you he punched someone who doesn't exist in any database, who routes directly to the most classified division of the CIA, and who chose not to break his neck even though she clearly could have. Jesus. Jesus has left the building, Ray. We are so far beyond Jesus right now. Chen sat down heavily. There's footage. Dozens of phones. It's probably already uploaded somewhere. Can we contain it? Contain it. Chen laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ray, we can't even officially acknowledge that woman exists. Any attempt to suppress the footage will just make it spread faster. We're dealing with Streisand effect on steroids. What about Brener? What about him? He's done. Even if she doesn't press charges, even if we bury this, even if somehow by the grace of God this doesn't blow up, he's done. You don't touch a Phoenix operative and walk away. She's one woman. Is she? Chen pulled up another screen showing the error log from her database query. Look at this. The system didn't just bounce me to Langley, it logged my query, time-stamped it, flagged it. Somewhere in Virginia, in a building that doesn't appear on any map, someone just got an alert that a local PD ran Alisa Monroe's name, and now they know exactly where she is and what happened to her. Morris slumped against the doorframe. How bad is this going to get? I don't know. But Ray... Chen looked up at him, and her eyes were haunted. She smiled when she said she wasn't pressing charges. She smiled, like she knows something we don't, like she's already 10 steps ahead, and we're still trying to figure out what game we're playing. In the holding area, Kyle sat alone on a bench, his head in his hands. His knuckles were still split from the punch. They throbbed in time with his heartbeat. Marcus Webb appeared in the doorway. Hey man, you okay? Do I look okay? Kyle's voice was muffled. Chen's calling it a mandatory psych eval, paid leave pending investigation. Paid leave? Kyle laughed bitterly. My career is over, Marcus. You know it, I know it. That woman, who the fuck is she? I don't know, man. But I know you fucked up. I thought... Kyle looked up and his eyes were red. She was just standing there, being disrespectful. I've dealt with 100 people like her, 1,000, and they all back down eventually. They all break. She didn't break. No. Kyle's hands were shaking again. She looked at me like she was waiting, like she knew exactly what I was going to do and she let me do it anyway. Why would she let me hit her? Marcus had no answer. He left Kyle there sitting in the sterile fluorescent light, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. The punch, the blood, those eyes, those terrible knowing eyes. Across town, Alisa Monroe walked into the Grant Heights Community Center like nothing had happened. Her lip had stopped bleeding, though it was swollen and would bruise spectacularly by tomorrow. The children were already gathered in the reading corner, sitting on colorful cushions, their faces bright with anticipation. They loved story time. Ms. Monroe. A little girl named Keisha jumped up. You're here! You're... She stopped, seeing Alisa's face. What happened to your mouth? I had an accident, Alisa said, gently sitting down in her chair. Does it hurt? A little. Did you go to the doctor? No, sweetheart, I don't need a doctor. Some things heal on their own. She pulled out the book she'd been planning to read, a story about a small bird who learned to fly. Now where were we? But the children were still staring at her lip. Keisha's older brother Deshaun spoke up. He was 9, old enough to know how the world worked. Somebody hit you. Alisa looked at him. Yes. Who? It doesn't matter who. It matters. Deshaun's hands balled into fists. If somebody hit you, you should hit them back. You should... Should I? Alisa set the book down. Deshaun, if I hit them back, what would happen? They'd know not to mess with you. Maybe. Or maybe they'd hit me harder. Or maybe I'd hurt them badly and go to jail. Or maybe it would just keep going, hit it back, hit harder, hit back harder, until someone ends up dead. She leaned forward. Do you know what real strength is? Deshaun was quiet, thinking. Real strength, Alisa continued, is knowing you could break someone and choosing not to. Real strength is standing still when everything in you wants to run or fight. Real strength is making someone look at themselves in the mirror. I don't understand, Keisha said. You will, baby. Someday you will. Alisa picked up the book again. Now let's read about the bird who learned to fly. She read to them for an hour, her voice steady and warm, occasionally wincing when her split lip pulled. The children gradually forgot about her injury lost in the story, but every few minutes one of them would glance at her face, at that swelling bruise, and something would change in their eyes. They were learning, even if they didn't know it yet. After story time, the center's director, Margaret Washington, pulled Alisa aside. She was a stout woman in her 60s with silver hair and the no-nonsense air of someone who'd been fighting for her community her whole life. Alisa, honey, what happened to your face? I was assaulted by a police officer. Margaret's face went hard. Did you report it? It's being handled. That's not what I asked. Alisa smiled slightly. I know what you asked, Margaret, and I'm telling you it's being handled. Trust me. Trust you? I don't even know who you really are. You show up here 6 months ago, volunteer for everything. Never talk about yourself, never ask for anything. The kids love you, the parents love you. But honey, you're a mystery. I'm just someone who wants to help. Nobody's just anything. Margaret studied her face. You're not scared. Most people, they get hit by a cop, they're scared. Angry maybe, but scared underneath. You're not scared at all. No. Why not? Alisa was quiet for a long moment. Because being scared would mean believing they have power over me. And they don't, Margaret. They never did. They just didn't know it yet. Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. What are you, Alisa? I'm someone who knows what happens next. That evening, the footage started to surface. Marcus Brown didn't upload it, he'd kept his word. But dozens of other people had recorded the incident, and social media doesn't sleep. By 6 p.m., #Grant Heights assault was trending locally. By 8 p.m., it had jumped to regional news. By 10 p.m., it was national. The video was crystal clear, the punch, the blood. Alisa's absolute stillness afterward, her calm voice saying, I'm just standing here. The internet exploded. Cop punches unarmed black woman for standing on sidewalk. Detective Kyle Brener caught on camera. Assaulting civilian woman refuses to fight back. Cops panic when they run her ID, but underneath the outrage, underneath the calls for justice and the #activism, something else was brewing. People were noticing things, asking questions. Who is she? Why is she so calm? Did you see how the other cops reacted when they ran her name? What kind of database errors route to Langley? She said she didn't need to press charges. She said, he already set something in motion. What does that mean? In an apartment in Silver Spring, Maryland, a woman named Rebecca Lynn sat at her computer scrolling through the footage. She was a data analyst for the Metropolitan Police Department, low-level, forgotten, the kind of person who processed paperwork and never made waves. She'd been the one Chen had asked to run Alisa Monroe's name through the extended databases. She'd been the one who got the Langley error. She'd been the one who quietly, carefully saved every single screenshot before her supervisor could tell her to delete them. Because Rebecca Lynn had a secret too, She'd been documenting police misconduct for 3 years, building a file, waiting for the right moment. Waiting for something big enough to matter. This was it. She copied the files to an encrypted drive, backed them up to 3 different cloud services. Then she sat back and watched the video one more time. Alisa Monroe, blood on her lip, looking at Kyle Brener like she could see straight through him to his bones. "Who are you?" Rebecca whispered to the screen. The woman in the video didn't answer, but her eyes said everything. "I'm the reckoning, and I'm already here." The night shift at the precinct always had a particular quality, the fluorescent hum of lights that never quite warmed the coldness of institutional walls, the distant sounds of holding cells, the shuffle of paperwork that never ended. But tonight, the usual rhythm was broken. Officers clustered in small groups, whispering, checking their phones, stealing glances toward Captain Morris's office, where the blinds had been drawn tight. Inside that office, Kyle Brener sat across from Morris and Chen, a union representative named Donald Pierce beside him. Pierce was a barrel-chested man with 25 years on the force and a face that had seen every kind of departmental disaster, but even he looked uncomfortable. "The video has 40,000 shares," Chen said, her voice flat. She turned her laptop around, showing the numbers climbing in real time. "That was 5 minutes ago. It's probably 50,000 now." Kyle's hands trembled on the armrests. "It's out of context. They don't show her being disrespectful. They show you punching an unarmed woman in the face." Morris cut him off. "Kyle, there is no context that makes that okay. None." She was resisting. She was standing still. Chen slammed her hand on the desk. "Every angle shows the same thing. You approached her. You escalated. You struck her. And she never, not once, raised a hand to defend herself." Pierce cleared his throat. "Look, obviously this is bad. But we've weathered bad before. Paid leave, internal investigation, wait for the news cycle to move on." "This isn't going to move on," Chen interrupted. She pulled up another screen. "Because of this." It was a Reddit thread already with 3,000 comments. The title read, "Why did the cops freak out when they ran her ID?" Morris leaned forward reading. His face went gray. The top comment with 2,000 upvotes: "I work in law enforcement IT. That kind of database error, the kind that routes to Langley, that's not normal. That's not even unusual. That's impossible unless someone has serious federal clearance, like Black Ops level clearance." Another comment gilded 3 times. "My buddy works at the Pentagon. He says there are levels of classification above top secret that don't even have names. People who exist in the system as ghosts, operators. And if you accidentally pull their file, your entire network gets flagged. Every keystroke logged, every query tracked. He says cops running a name and getting a Langley error. That's someone way, way above their pay grade." Kyle felt the room spinning. "That's conspiracy theory bullshit. She's just some what?" Chen's voice was deadly quiet. "Some woman, some nobody. Kyle, I ran her name through 7 different databases. Every single one routed to the same place. Do you understand what that means? It means there's a glitch. It means she's protected by the federal government at the highest level." Chen was standing now, her voice rising. "It means every agency in this country knows who she is, except us. It means we just assaulted someone that the CIA considers important enough to bury under 6 layers of security clearance." "We don't know that," Pierce interjected weakly. "Then explain the error logs." Chen pulled up another screen showing lines of code that meant nothing to Kyle, but clearly meant everything to her. "I tried to access her file. The system locked me out. Then it logged my attempt. Then it sent an automated notification to, and I quote, authorized oversight personnel. Someone in the federal government knows I tried to look her up. Someone knows exactly when from which terminal, using whose credentials. We are being watched, gentlemen. Right now. This very second." The room fell silent. Morris rubbed his face with both hands. "Jesus Christ, Kyle. Who did you punch?" Before Kyle could answer, there was a sharp knock on the door. A young officer, fresh-faced and nervous, stuck his head in. "Captain, sir. There's a woman here to see you. She says it's about the Grant Heights incident." "We're not taking statements right now. She's not a witness, sir. She says she's from the agency." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "What agency?" Morris asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. "She didn't say, sir. Just the agency. She's in conference room B. She said you'd want to see her immediately." Morris and Chen exchanged looks. Pierce had gone pale. Kyle felt his bladder clench. "All of you stay here," Morris said, standing. "Don't move. Don't talk. Don't even breathe loud." He left Chen following close behind. Kyle sat in the sudden silence, listening to his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Pierce leaned over. "Kyle, whatever happens, don't say anything without me present. You hear me? Nothing. What's going to happen?" "I don't know, but I've been doing this job for 25 years, and I've never not once had the CIA show up at a precinct for an assault case." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Who the hell did you punch?" Down the hall, Morris and Chen entered conference room B. The woman waiting for them was in her 40s, Asian American, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Morris made in a month. She had short black hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that missed nothing. "Captain Morris, Lieutenant Chen." She didn't offer her hand. "I'm Dr. Lydia Park. I'm here regarding the incident involving Ms. Monroe." "Dr. Park," Morris said carefully. "What agency are you with? Does it matter?" "Yes." Park smiled thinly. "Let's just say I work for an organization that takes a keen interest in the welfare of certain individuals. Ms. Monroe is one of those individuals." "Is she CIA?" Chen asked bluntly. "I can neither confirm nor deny Ms. Monroe's employment status with any government agency." "That's a yes," Chen muttered. "That's a carefully worded non-answer," Park corrected. "What I can tell you is that Ms. Monroe is a person of interest to multiple federal agencies, and any harm that comes to her is taken very seriously." Morris felt sweat beading on his forehead. "She was assaulted by one of our officers. We're conducting a full investigation. I've seen the video, all of them." Park pulled out a tablet, swiped through footage from a dozen different angles. "I've also seen Detective Brener's service record. 3 excessive force complaints in the last 5 years, all dismissed. 7 citizen complaints for verbal abuse. 2 lawsuits settled quietly by the city. He's a ticking time bomb, and you've been hitting snooze. We're addressing the situation. Too late." Park set the tablet down. "Ms. Monroe has declined to press charges. Do you know why?" "No." "Because she doesn't need to. Detective Brener has already triggered consequences that are far beyond your jurisdiction or mine." Park stood smoothing her suit. "I'm here as a courtesy, Captain, to tell you that what happens next is out of your hands. Ms. Monroe set something in motion the moment she chose not to fight back. Something that your detective cannot stop, that you cannot contain, that will run its course regardless of what anyone in this building does." Chen felt ice in her stomach. "What does that mean? Is she going to have him killed? Disappeared?" Park's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You've been watching too many movies, Lieutenant. Ms. Monroe doesn't need to have anyone killed. She's far more dangerous than that." "How?" "Because she understands something that Detective Brener doesn't. Violence is easy. It's quick. It's satisfying. It's over fast. But silence." Park's smile was cold. "Silence is devastating. Silence lets people destroy themselves. And Ms. Monroe is very, very good at being silent." She moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. The footage is going to spread. Don't try to contain it. Don't try to suppress it. Don't issue statements defending your officer, because every action you take will make it worse. The internet is already digging into who she is. They won't find much, we've made sure of that, but what they do find will raise questions. Questions that will make Detective Brener wish he'd kept his hands to himself." "What will they find?" Morris asked. "Gaps, absences, ghost stories." Park opened the door. Good luck, Captain. You're going to need it. She left her heels clicking down the hallway like a countdown. Chen slumped against the wall. We are so fucked. Language, Morris said automatically, but his heart wasn't in it. What do we do? Exactly what she said. Nothing. We wait. We watch. And we pray that whatever Monroe set in motion doesn't take us down with Brener. By midnight, the video had 2 million views. By 2 a.m., it was on CNN. By dawn, every major news network was running the story, and Alisa Monroe's name was trending #1 worldwide. But nobody could find anything about her. No social media accounts, no public records beyond a driver's license, no employment history, no school transcripts. It was as if she'd materialized fully formed in Grant Heights 6 months ago and lived like a ghost ever since. The internet did what the internet does best, it speculated. She's a federal agent. She's witness protection. She's a black ops assassin. She's a plant trying to make cops look bad. The theories spiraled wilder and wilder, but underneath them all was one question that nobody could answer. Who is Alisa Monroe? In her small apartment above a bodega, Alisa sat at her window, watching the sun rise over Grant Heights. Her lip was swollen purple and yellow, a bruise spreading across her jaw. She touched it gently, feeling the tenderness, the heat of inflammation. Her phone had been ringing all night. News agencies, lawyers, activists, people wanting her story, wanting to help, wanting to use her pain for their causes. She'd turned it off hours ago. There was a soft knock at her door. She didn't move. Alisa! It was Mrs. Patterson. Baby, I know you're in there. I brought soup. Alisa Rose unlocked the door. Mrs. Patterson entered carrying a covered pot, her eyes immediately going to Alisa's face. Lord have mercy, she breathed. It looks worse than yesterday. It'll heal. That's not the point. Mrs. Patterson set the soup on the small table, then turned to face Alisa fully. I've been watching the news all night. They're saying things about you, saying you're some kind of government agent. Is that true? Alisa was quiet for a long moment. Would it change how you see me? I asked you a question, child. I worked for the government, yes. In a capacity I can't discuss. I don't anymore. Why not? Because I got tired of the silence. Alisa moved to the window, looking out at her neighborhood. I spent years in places where speaking up meant death, where the truth was a weapon and silence was survival. And then I came home and realized we live in our own kind of war zone. Different weapons. Same silence. Mrs. Patterson sat heavily. That man who hit you. He's done it before, hasn't he? To others, yes. The complaints are in his file. The settlements are public record if you know where to look. And you knew this before he hit you. I knew the type. I've seen men like Kyle Brener all over the world. Different uniforms, different flags, same fear underneath, same need to prove they're strong by making others weak. So you let him hit you on purpose. It wasn't a question. Mrs. Patterson's voice was flat, almost accusing. Alisa turned from the window. I stood still. There's a difference. Not to me, there isn't. You knew what would happen, and you let it happen anyway. Why? For what? To prove a point. To show people what already exists. Alisa's voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Patterson, how many times has someone in this neighborhood been hurt by police? How many complaints filed? How many videos taken? And how many times did anything change? Not often enough. Because the violence happens in the dark, in hallways, in backyards, in places where the cameras can't see and the witnesses are too scared to talk. What happened to me was different. It was broad daylight. It was a crowded street. It was captured from every angle. And most importantly, she touched her swollen lip. I survived it. I walked away. And now nobody can pretend it didn't happen. You used yourself as bait. I used myself as a mirror. Kyle Brener saw a black woman standing on a sidewalk and couldn't control himself. That says everything about him and nothing about me. Mrs. Patterson was crying now, silent tears running down her weathered cheeks. "Baby, that's too heavy a burden for one person to carry." "I've carried heavier." "I don't doubt it, but that doesn't mean you should." She stood, moved to Alisa, took her face gently in her hands. "You listen to me. Whatever you did before, whatever you've seen, whatever darkness you've walked through, you're home now. You're in Grant Heights. And we take care of our own. You don't have to fight alone anymore." Alisa's eyes glistened. "I'm not fighting Mrs. Patterson. That's the whole point. I'm not fighting at all." "Then what are you doing?" "Watching, waiting, letting the truth work." Across town, Kyle Brener sat in his own apartment, the blinds drawn, surrounded by empty beer bottles. His phone was off. His computer was off. But he could still hear it, the constant buzz of the world talking about him, judging him, destroying him one share at a time. His wife had left that morning. Packed a bag taken. Their daughter didn't say where they were going. Just looked at him with those dead eyes and said, "I can't be married to you anymore, Kyle. Not after what I saw." "It was an accident," he'd tried to explain. "She provoked me." "She stood still. I watched the video. She stood perfectly still, and you hit her anyway." His wife's voice had been cold, clinical, like she was diagnosing a disease. "I always made excuses for you. The complaints, the anger, the way you talked about people. I told myself you were stressed. You were protecting us. You were doing a hard job. But Kyle, there's no excuse for what you did. None." She'd left. The door had closed, and Kyle had been alone with his thoughts ever since. He reached for another beer, found the case empty. Considered going out to get more, remembered the looks people had given him at the gas station yesterday. The clerk who'd recognized him from the video, whose smile had frozen, who'd served him in silence with hands that shook slightly. His phone was off, but he could feel it buzzing in his mind. Could imagine the notifications piling up. Death threats, probably. Doxing. People finding his address, his wife's name, his daughter's school. He'd done this before. Weathered public outrage, waited for it to blow over. But something about this felt different. The way Dr. Park had looked at him at the precinct. The way Chen had talked about database errors and federal oversight. The way Alisa Monroe had looked at him with those calm, knowing eyes. His hands were shaking. He'd noticed it starting yesterday, a fine tremor that made holding a coffee cup difficult. Stress, he'd told himself. Just stress. But it wasn't just stress. It was fear. Deep, primal animal fear. Because Kyle Brener had finally realized something: he'd made an enemy he couldn't fight. Couldn't intimidate. Couldn't make go away with violence or authority or any of the tools he'd relied on his entire career. He'd made an enemy who was defeating him without lifting a finger. At the Metropolitan Police Department, Rebecca Lynn sat in her cubicle in the basement where the data analysts worked, surrounded by monitors and the constant hum of servers. It was 3 a.m. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. She pulled up the files again. The ones she'd saved. The ones she wasn't supposed to have. The database query that had bounced to Langley. The error logs. The automated flagging system. And most importantly, the brief flash she'd caught before her access was revoked, a file name that made her blood run cold. Phoenix Personnel, Monroe, Alisa. Classified TS. SCITS, SCI. Top secret / sensitive compartmented information. The highest level of classification outside of special access programs. Rebecca had worked in government data systems for 7 years. She knew what TS/SCI meant. It meant black budgets and congressional oversight and programs that didn't officially exist. It meant operations in countries where the U.S. was technically at peace. It meant the kind of work that people died for, killed for, lied to Congress about. And Kyle Brener had punched someone with that level of clearance in the face on a public street. Rebecca's hands hovered over her keyboard. She could delete the files, pretend she'd never seen them, go back to her quiet life of data entry and avoiding attention. Or, she opened an encrypted email account she'd set up months ago under a pseudonym. Started composing a message to every investigative journalist she could think of. Not sending the classified files that would be illegal would make her a target. But sending everything else. The publicly available complaints against Brener, the settled lawsuits, the pattern of behavior that stretched back years. And one line at the bottom. Ask yourself why the database routed to Langley. Ask yourself who Alisa Monroe really is. Ask yourself what she's waiting for. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she sat back, her heart pounding, and whispered to the empty office. Let's see what happens when they can't bury this anymore. By morning, 3 major investigative journalists had received Rebecca's email. By noon, they were digging. By evening, the first article dropped. The Kyle Brener pattern. A decade of complaints, settlements, and silence. It detailed every incident, every complaint, every time the department had quietly paid someone to go away rather than discipline their officer. Names, dates, amounts. All public record, but never compiled, never presented as the clear pattern it was. The internet exploded again. But buried in the comments in the Reddit threads in the conspiracy forums, another conversation was happening. People were connecting dots, noticing things. Alisa Monroe had moved to Grant Heights 6 months ago. Before that, no record. Before that, nothing. Like she'd appeared out of thin air with a government-created identity and a purpose nobody understood. Why Grant Heights? Why that neighborhood? Why volunteer at a community center? Read to children, help elderly people with groceries. Unless she'd been waiting, watching, documenting, waiting for someone like Kyle Brener to reveal himself. The theory spread like wildfire. Alisa Monroe was bait, a federal operative planted in a high complaint district to expose systemic police corruption. The punch wasn't an accident, it was exactly what she'd been waiting for. In her apartment, Alisa read the theories with something that might have been amusement. They were close. Not quite right, but close. She hadn't been sent to Grant Heights. She'd chosen it. After years of operations in war zones, after missions that still woke her up at 3 a.m. with her heart pounding, after the Phoenix program had taught her 100 ways to kill and 0 ways to heal, she'd chosen to come home. To the kind of neighborhood where she'd grown up. The kind of place where power was abused because people had learned to expect nothing better. The kind of community that deserved someone who understood how systems worked and how they could be broken. She hadn't been looking for Kyle Brener specifically, but she'd known someone like him would eventually reveal themselves. They always did. Put enough pressure on a system and the cracks show. The weak points expose themselves. All she'd had to do was stand still and wait. Her phone rang. A blocked number. She answered it. Monroe. The voice was male, older, with the careful diction of someone who'd spent a lifetime giving classified briefings. It's Director Walsh. Alisa stood straighter despite being alone. Sir. I'm watching the news. Hell of a situation you've created. I didn't create anything, sir. I just stood on a sidewalk. Don't play coy with me. You knew exactly what you were doing. You've been doing it for 6 months. Walsh's voice wasn't angry, just tired. The question is why? You're out. You're done. You earned your retirement. Why put yourself back in play? Because retirement doesn't mean I stopped seeing, sir. Seeing what? The same patterns we spent years fighting overseas. Different uniforms. Same abuse of power. I spent a decade helping to destabilize corrupt governments in other countries. Seemed hypocritical not to notice the corruption in my own. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. The agency is getting pressure. Senator Michaels wants to know who you are, why you're protected, whether this is an official operation. It's not. I know, but that doesn't stop the questions. Walsh sighed. Alisa, you need to understand something. If this gets too hot, if it starts threatening classified programs, they'll pull you back in. Protective custody, debriefing, silence you for national security. Let them try. I'm serious. So am I, sir, respectfully. Alisa's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. I spent 10 years in silence for this country, operating in places that don't exist, doing things that won't be declassified for 50 years. I earned the right to stand on a sidewalk in my own neighborhood, and if someone hits me for it, they earn the consequences. The consequences being truth, sir, just truth. I'm not leaking classified information. I'm not compromising operations. I'm just letting people see what happens when power meets accountability. Walsh laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're scarier than half the targets we've eliminated. You know that. Thank you, sir. It wasn't a compliment. He paused. Watch your back, Monroe. The people who want this buried, they're not all wearing badges. Some of them are in buildings a lot scarier than police precincts. I know, sir. And you're doing this anyway. Yes, sir. Christ. Walsh hung up. Alisa set the phone down and returned to the window. Down on the street, she could see people gathering. Word had spread about where she lived. Not protesters, supporters. People holding signs, bringing flowers, standing vigil. Mrs. Patterson was down there organizing them, making sure they stayed peaceful, making sure they didn't block the sidewalk or disturb other residents, turning grief into community. Alisa watched them and felt something crack in her chest. Something she'd kept sealed tight for years. The belief that people were good, that communities could heal, that silence could be broken without violence. She'd spent so long in the dark believing the only way to fix broken systems was to destroy them from within. Sabotage, elimination, ghost operations that made dictators disappear in the night. But maybe there was another way, a slower way, a way that didn't require her to become the monster to fight monsters. Maybe she could just stand still and let the truth do the rest. Her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. They're coming for you. Delete everything. Run. Alisa stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. She wasn't running. Not anymore. She'd spent a lifetime running toward danger, away from consequences, through shadows that swallowed everything good. Now she was going to stand still, and she was going to watch what happened when she did. Below her window, the vigil grew. Someone started singing. Others joined in. The sound rose through the evening air, carrying pain and hope and the stubborn refusal to be silent anymore. Alisa Monroe stood at her window and listened, her bruised face reflected in the glass, and smiled. Let them come. Let them try to bury this. Let them do everything in their power to make her disappear. She was already a ghost. She'd been one for years. But now she was a ghost that wouldn't stop haunting them until the truth came out. And nothing, not the police, not the government, not the forces that wanted her silent, could stop a truth whose time had come. The song continued. The vigil grew. And somewhere across town, Kyle Brener sat alone in the dark, listening to his life collapse, one view, one share, one revelation at a time. He'd thought he was hunting prey that day on the sidewalk. He'd had no idea he was walking into a trap that had been set not with weapons, but with patience. And now the trap had closed, and there was no escape. The vigil lasted 3 days. What started as 20 people holding candles became 200 holding signs, then became a permanent encampment with tents and food tables and organizers, with megaphones coordinating shifts. Grant Heights had found its voice, and it was refusing to be quiet. On the second morning, Kyle tried to leave his apartment for the first time since the incident. He made it as far as the parking garage before a reporter recognized him. Then another. Then a crowd materialized from nowhere, phones raised, questions flying like bullets. Detective Brener, do you regret hitting Alisa Monroe? How many other people have you assaulted? Is it true the department covered up your previous complaints? Kyle ran. Actually ran, stumbling back to the elevator, his hands shaking so badly he could barely press the button. Behind him, the reporters shouted more questions, their voices echoing off concrete walls like a judgment he couldn't escape. Back in his apartment, he locked the door, threw the deadbolt, put the chain on. His reflection caught him in the hallway mirror, unshaven eyes, bloodshot shirt stained with sweat. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, which he hadn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. That calm, knowing expression. Those eyes that had looked straight through him and seen something rotten at his core. His phone still off sat on the kitchen counter like a bomb waiting to explode. He'd turned it on once, just once long enough to see 700 missed calls and 2,000 text messages before the panic attack hit, and he'd powered it down again. But he couldn't stop himself. His hands moved before his brain could intervene, pressing the power button, waiting for the screen to light up. The messages flooded in. Most were blocked numbers, anonymous accounts, burner emails. Death threats mostly. Creative ones. People describing in detail what they wanted to do to him, how they wanted to make him suffer, how he deserved every ounce of pain he'd inflicted on others. But worse than the threats were the other messages. The ones from people he knew. His brother. Don't contact me. Don't contact Mom. You're dead to this family. His former partner from 5 years ago. I always knew you were dirty. Glad everyone else finally sees it too. His wife's sister Emma and Sophie are safe. You'll never see them again. We'll make sure of that. Sophie. His daughter. 8 years old, gap-toothed Smile thought her daddy was a hero. Past tense. Thought. Kyle's hands were shaking so badly the phone slipped, clattered on the counter. He reached for it, knocked over a glass instead. It shattered on the tile floor, crystal fragments spreading like shrapnel. He stood there staring at the broken glass and started to laugh. The sound was high and thin and wrong, the kind of laugh that comes when sanity starts to fray at the edges. Across town, Captain Morris sat in an emergency meeting with the chief of police, the city's legal counsel, and 3 people from the mayor's office. The conference room had the sterile feel of a place where careers came to die. 14 lawsuits, the lead counsel said, tapping her tablet. Filed in the last 48 hours, all citing the Monroe incident as evidence of systemic misconduct. They're using it as a catalyst to reopen every case Brener ever touched. Chief Harrison rubbed his temples. How bad? Bad. We're talking wrongful arrest, excessive force, civil rights violations going back a decade. And these aren't nuisance suits from ambulance chasers. These are top-tier civil rights firms working pro bono. They smell blood. The Monroe woman, the mayor's chief of staff said. Has she made any demands? Filed any claims? Nothing, Morris replied. She hasn't spoken to the press, hasn't hired a lawyer. Hasn't done anything except go about her normal routine. That's not normal, Harrison said. Someone gets assaulted by a cop on camera, they lawyer up immediately. Why isn't she? Morris thought about Dr. Park's words. She doesn't need to. She's already set something in motion that will run its course. I don't know, sir, but I think that's the point. She's letting everyone else do the work. The chief of staff leaned forward. There are rumors she's federal. CIA specifically. Can anyone confirm or deny? Silence around the table. That's a no, Harrison said grimly. Which means she probably is, which means we've got a whole different level of problem. Do you have any idea what it means if we assaulted a federal agent? We didn't assault anyone, the legal counsel corrected. Officer Brener did. The department is a separate entity. The department that employed him, trained him, ignored complaints about him for years, and let him patrol with a weapon and a badge despite multiple red flags. Harrison's voice was sharp. Don't give me that separation bullshit. If she wanted to, she could argue we created the conditions that made this inevitable. And given the pattern of behavior that's now public record, she'd win. So what do? We throw Brener to the wolves. Immediate termination. Full cooperation with any investigation. Public apology. Distance ourselves as hard and fast as possible. Morris felt sick. He'd known this was coming, but hearing it said out loud made it real. He has union protection, due process. Fuck due process, Harrison snapped. We're past that. This isn't about one bad cop anymore. This is about whether this entire department survives the year. Brener is done. The only question is whether he takes us all down with him." At the Grant Heights Community Center, Alisa sat in her usual chair in the reading corner surrounded by children. Her bruise had deepened to a spectacular purple-black spreading across her jaw and down her neck. The kids couldn't stop staring. "Does it hurt?" Keisha asked for the 10th time. "Less than yesterday," Alisa answered patiently. "My mama says the cop who hit you is gonna go to jail." "Maybe." "Don't you want him to go to jail?" This from Deshaun, his young face creased with confusion. "He hurt you." Alisa set down the book she'd been about to read. "Can I tell you all something important?" The children leaned in, sensing this was different from their usual story time. "Jail doesn't fix people," Alisa said quietly. "It just puts them in a cage. And when people are in cages, they don't learn. They don't change. They just get angrier. What I really want, is for that officer to understand why what he did was wrong. I want him to see himself clearly. And you can't do that from a jail cell." "But he has to be punished," Deshaun insisted. "That's not fair if he just gets away with it." "Who said he's getting away with it?" Alisa's smile was sad. Sometimes the worst punishment isn't what other people do to you. It's what you do to yourself when you finally understand what you've become. The children didn't fully understand. They were too young, but they would remember these words. Years later, when they were older, they would remember the woman with the bruised face who taught them that vengeance and justice weren't the same thing. Margaret Washington watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When story time ended and the children scattered to other activities, she approached Alisa. "You're playing a dangerous game," Margaret said quietly. "Am I playing? I don't know. That's what scares me." Margaret sat in one of the small chairs, looking absurdly large in the child-sized furniture. "I've been making calls, talking to people, trying to figure out who you really are." "And what did you find?" "Nothing, which tells me everything." Margaret's eyes were sharp. "You know what you are, Alisa. You're a ghost story. You're the kind of person who doesn't exist in databases because someone very powerful decided you shouldn't. And that means you're either running from something terrible or you did something terrible. Maybe both." Alisa was quiet for a long moment. "Does it matter which?" "To me, yes. Because those kids in there love you. This community loves you. And if you're using us for some kind of agenda..." "I'm not using anyone." Alisa's voice was firm. "I came to Grant Heights because I was tired. Tired of the darkness. Tired of the lies. Tired of being a weapon. I came here to remember what it felt like to be human." And Brener was inevitable. Men like him can't help themselves. Put them near vulnerability, and they have to exploit it. It's like a compulsion. Alisa stood moving to the window where she could see the vigil still going on outside. "I didn't plan what happened, but I wasn't surprised by it either." Margaret joined her at the window. "People are saying you're some kind of superhero, a secret agent who came to save us from corrupt cops." "I'm not a hero, Margaret. I'm just someone who knows how to stand still." "That's a hell of a superpower in a world where everyone's taught to run or fight." Alisa smiled slightly. "I learned it the hard way." "Want to tell me how?" For a long moment, Alisa was silent. Then she spoke, her voice distant, remembering. "There was a village in Kandahar province. 2019. Phoenix sent me in to extract an asset who'd been compromised. Local warlord had him in a compound planning to execute him publicly as a CIA spy. My job was to get him out." Margaret listened, barely breathing. Standard protocol would have been to go in hard, weapons, explosives, extract under cover of chaos. But intelligence said there were children in the compound, civilians. So I did something different. I walked in the front gate, no weapons, no backup. Just walked in and asked to speak to the warlord. "You're insane." "Probably. But here's the thing about men with absolute power. They're not used to people who aren't afraid of them. The warlord could have killed me instantly. But he didn't. He was curious. Why would someone walk into certain death so calmly? What did I know that he didn't? What happened? I sat with him for 6 hours, didn't threaten, didn't negotiate, just talked. About his family, his fears, his understanding that the Americans would eventually leave and he'd be alone with his choices. By the end he was crying. He let my asset go, let all the civilians go, and 3 months later he surrendered to the UN and testified against his former allies. Margaret stared. That's impossible. It happened, because I understood something that took me years to learn. Violence is easy. It's fast. It feels like progress. But real change, the kind that lasts, comes from making people see themselves. From holding up a mirror they can't look away from. And that's what you're doing to Brener. That's what I'm letting Brener do to himself. Before Margaret could respond, there was a commotion outside, raised voices. The crowd at the vigil was growing agitated, pointing at something down the street. Alisa and Margaret moved to the window. A man was approaching the vigil, middle-aged white, wearing an expensive suit. He had the bearing of someone used to authority, but there was something desperate in his movements. "That's Pierce," Margaret said. "Kyle Brener's union rep." They watched as Pierce tried to address the crowd. Someone threw a plastic water bottle. It bounced off his shoulder harmlessly, but the message was clear. He wasn't welcome here. Pierce's voice carried up to the window. "Please, I just want to talk. I represent Detective Brener and—" "Get the fuck out of here," someone shouted. "Your client is a racist thug. Tell him to come apologize himself if he's got something to say." Pierce held up his hands, pleading. "He wants to apologize. That's why I'm here. He wants to meet with Ms. Monroe to explain." The crowd erupted, angry shouts overlapping, building on each other, until the individual words were lost in a wall of sound. Mrs. Patterson was trying to calm people down, but even she looked furious. Alisa watched it all with those calm, measuring eyes. "You should go down there," Margaret said. "Tell them to back off before someone gets hurt." "No." "Alisa, this needs to happen, Margaret. They need to feel this anger. They've been swallowing it for years, pushing it down, being told to be reasonable and calm and respectful while they're brutalized. Let them yell. Let them throw water bottles. Let them show this man that there are consequences to enabling abuse." "What if it escalates?" "It won't. Look." Alisa pointed. "Mrs. Patterson has it under control." And she did. The older woman had positioned herself between Pierce and the most aggressive protesters, her presence alone creating a buffer. She was talking now, her voice carrying authority that had nothing to do with volume. "We don't hurt people here," Mrs. Patterson declared. "That's what separates us from them. You want to yell. Yell. You want to tell this man exactly what his client did to our community. Tell him. But we don't throw things. We don't attack. Because we're better than that." The crowd quieted slightly, still angry, but no longer on the edge of violence. Mrs. Patterson turned to Pierce. "You got 30 seconds to say what you came to say. Then you leave. Understand?" Pierce nodded, his face pale. "Detective Brener is deeply sorry for what happened. He's struggling with mental health issues, the stress of the job, PTSD from traumatic incidents. He wants to apologize to Ms. Monroe directly, to seek her forgiveness, to make amends." "Amends," someone shouted. "How you gonna amend 10 years of abuse? What about all the other people he hurt? They getting apologies too? This is bullshit. He's just trying to save his pension." Pierce's voice rose desperately. "Please, he's a human being. He made a terrible mistake, but he's suffering." "Good." The shout came from a young woman Alisa recognized, Maria Gonzalez, whose brother had been arrested by Brener 2 years ago, had his arm broken during the arrest, spent 3 days in the hospital. "I hope he suffers every day for the rest of his life. I hope he feels every ounce of pain he's caused." The crowd roared agreement. Pierce looked up at the community center as if he could sense Alisa watching. "Ms. Monroe, if you're there, please just meet with him once. Give him a chance to—" Alisa turned from the window. "You're not going to respond?" Margaret asked. "I don't need to. He's already got his answer." And she was right. The crowd was chanting now a unified voice. "No peace for the wicked. No peace for the wicked." Pierce stood there for another minute, looking lost and desperate, before finally walking away. The crowd parted to let him through, silent, now their eyes following him like predators watching prey leave their territory. That night, Rebecca Lynn sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the precinct. Her laptop open, her third espresso going cold beside her. She'd been digging for 16 hours straight, following threads that kept leading to more threads, unraveling a pattern that got uglier the more she exposed. Kyle Brener wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom. She'd found 18 other officers in the department with similar complaint patterns. Not as severe as Brener's, but close. All of them still working. All of them protected by the same system that had protected Brener until his violence became too public to ignore. And the settlements. God, the settlements. The city had paid out $4 million in the last 5 years alone to make excessive force complaints go away. $4 million of taxpayer money used to bury abuse. Her phone buzzed. An encrypted message from one of the journalists she'd contacted. "We're ready to publish. Need you to verify one more detail. The Phoenix connection. Can you confirm Monroe's file showed TS/SCI clearance?" Rebecca's hands hovered over the keyboard. This was it. The point of no return. Once she confirmed classified information, even to a journalist, she was breaking federal law. She could go to prison. Lose everything. Her phone buzzed again. A different message. This one from an unknown number. "Stop. Delete everything. Final warning." Rebecca stared at it. Someone was watching her, tracking her communications, knew exactly what she was doing. She thought about Alisa Monroe standing perfectly still while a cop punched her in the face. Not fighting back, not running, just standing there and letting the truth work. Rebecca took a deep breath and typed her response to the journalist. Confirmed. TS/SCI. Phoenix Program Designation. The file exists. She's real. She hit send, then immediately opened her backdoor access to the police network and downloaded every file she could grab in the next 60 seconds. Personnel records, internal affairs reports, budget documents showing the settlement payments. Everything. The files copied to her encrypted drives just as her screen flashed red. Unauthorized access detected. Security breach. Terminal locked. Rebecca slammed her laptop shut, heart pounding. They knew. They'd caught her. She grabbed her things and walked out of the coffee shop as casually as she could manage every muscle screaming at her to run. Outside, the street was quiet. Normal. No black SUVs screeching to a halt. No federal agents materializing from the shadows. But as she walked to her car, she felt it the weight of being watched, of having crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Her phone buzzed one more time. "You just made a very big mistake." Rebecca got in her car, started the engine, and drove. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from the precinct, away from her apartment, away from everything familiar. Her phone rang. Blocked number. She almost didn't answer. "Hello? Ms. Lynn." The voice was female, cultured, familiar. "This is Dr. Park. We met briefly at the precinct." Rebecca's blood went cold. "How did you—" "We need to talk. There's a diner on Route 50 mile marker 23. Be there in 40 minutes. Come alone. Don't contact anyone. Don't go home. Just drive." "I don't—" "Ms. Lynn, you just accessed and copied classified information. You're currently being tracked by 3 different federal agencies. If you don't meet me, the next people you talk to will be FBI agents with a warrant. So drive. Now." The line went dead. Rebecca's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. This was it. This was how her life ended. Arrested for espionage, career destroyed, family disgraced. But she drove. Because what other choice did she have? The diner was one of those 24-hour places that existed in the liminal space between nowhere and nothing, flickering neon empty parking lot, the kind of place where people came when they didn't want to be found. Dr. Park was already there, sitting in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee waiting. She gestured for Rebecca to sit. "I'm not going to apologize," Rebecca said immediately. "What I did was right. The public deserves to know." "I agree," Park said. Rebecca stopped mid-sentence. "What?" "I said, I agree. What you did was right. Illegal, but right. Those are not mutually exclusive." Park pushed one of the coffee cups toward Rebecca. "The question is, what happens next?" "You're going to arrest me." "No." "Then what?" Park pulled out a tablet, brought up a file. Rebecca recognized her own face in the photo attached. Her full background, education, work history, even things that shouldn't be in any database. Her medical records, her therapy sessions after her assault 5 years ago, her mother's immigration status. "We know everything about you, Ms. Lynn. We've known for weeks, since the moment you first accessed Alisa Monroe's file. We've been watching." "Then why didn't you stop me?" "Because we wanted to see what you'd do. Whether you'd do the right thing, even when it was dangerous." Park closed the tablet. "Rebecca. Can I call you Rebecca? You're not in trouble. You're being recruited." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "The Phoenix program doesn't just train field operatives. We also need analysts. People who can see patterns. People who care about justice more than self-preservation. People who, when faced with a choice between safety and truth, choose truth every time." Rebecca's laugh was slightly hysterical. "You're recruiting me. Now, after I just committed a felony." "The felony was a test. You passed." Park leaned forward. Alisa Monroe wasn't sent to Grant Heights by the agency. She went rogue 6 months ago, resigned from active duty, moved to that neighborhood, started volunteering. We've been monitoring her, trying to figure out her agenda. And what is it? We don't know, but we know it's working. Kyle Brener was just the catalyst. Monroe is exposing something bigger, a system of abuse that goes deeper than one cop. And she's doing it without firing a shot, without breaking a law, without doing anything except standing still and letting the dominoes fall. Rebecca shook her head, trying to process. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because we need people like you. People who understand that the real threats to national security aren't always foreign. Sometimes they're domestic. Sometimes they're the rot within our own institutions." Park slid a card across the table. "Just a phone number, nothing else. When this is over, when Monroe's plan plays out and the dust settles, call that number. We'll talk about your future. And if I don't, then you go back to your life, but you'll be under federal protection. What you've uncovered, what you've exposed there, are people who will want you silenced. We'll make sure they can't touch you." Park stood to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Monroe knows you helped. She knows you're the one who sent those files to the journalists, and she's grateful." "How do you know?" Park smiled. "Because she told me. She called me 3 hours ago and said, 'There's a data analyst at MPD who's about to do something brave and stupid. Make sure she doesn't get killed for it.'" She left, leaving Rebecca sitting alone in the booth, staring at the card, trying to understand how her entire life had just changed direction in a single conversation. Outside, the night was deep and quiet. And somewhere in Grant Heights, Alisa Monroe lay in her bed, eyes open, watching shadows move across her ceiling. She could feel it building. The pressure, the momentum, the inevitable cascade that happened when you pushed a system past its breaking point. Kyle Brener was cracking. She could sense it even from a distance. Men like him, men whose entire identity was built on power and control, they couldn't handle having both stripped away. They broke. They always broke. The question was what he would do when he finally shattered. Her phone buzzed. A text from Director Walsh. They want to bring you in. Protective custody, before this gets worse. Alisa typed back. Let them try. Monroe. Don't be stupid. You've made your point. Let it go. I can't. It's already in motion. What's in motion? What's the end game here? Alisa stared at the message for a long time before responding. Truth, sir. Just truth. And once it starts, it doesn't stop until everything rotten is exposed. She turned off her phone and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, Kyle Brener would make his choice, and the world would see what happened when silence finally inevitably gave way to the scream. Dawn broke over Grant Heights with the kind of gray light that made everything look washed out and temporary. Kyle Brener stood at his window watching the world wake up and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd slept. 3 days. 4 time had become elastic, stretching and compressing in ways that made him question whether he was still sane. His phone lay on the counter where he'd left it screen dark, but he could feel it pulling at him like gravity. Just one more look, just to see how bad it had gotten. He picked it up. The screen lit up with notifications that made his stomach drop. The investigative piece Rebecca had helped publish had gone nuclear overnight. Every major outlet was running with it. The New York Times, Washington Post, CNN had done a full segment, and they weren't just covering Kyle anymore. They were connecting dots, showing patterns, naming names. 18 other officers. The $4 million in settlements. A decade of complaints systematically buried. The headline on the Times made his hands shake. The Brener Effect, how one viral video exposed systemic police abuse. Not the Monroe Effect. The Brener Effect. His name was going to be the one people remembered. Not as a cop who served his community. As a symbol. A cautionary tale. The man whose violence was so blatant, so undeniable, that it finally broke through the wall of silence. Kyle threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall screen shattering, and he felt a savage satisfaction at the destruction. Then immediately regretted it. That was his only connection to the world, and he'd just destroyed it. He was alone now. Completely, utterly alone. A knock at the door made him jump. He stood frozen, heart hammering. Another knock, more insistent. Kyle, it's Marcus. Open up, man. Marcus Webb, his former partner. Kyle moved to the door but didn't open it. Go away. I need to talk to you. There's nothing to say. Kyle, please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Against his better judgment, Kyle unlocked the door. Marcus stepped in, and the look on his face, pity mixed with disgust, made Kyle want to slam the door closed again. You look like shit, Marcus said. Thanks for the observation. Marcus moved to the kitchen, taking in the empty bottles, the broken glass still on the floor from days ago, the general decay. When's the last time you ate? I don't know. What do you want, Marcus? The union called. They're dropping you. Pierce said it's indefensible. Too much public pressure. Kyle felt the words like a physical blow. They can't do that. I paid my dues. You punched a woman in the face on camera, Kyle. You think dues matter now? Marcus's voice was hard. Chen's recommending immediate termination. No hearing. No appeal. Just gone. That's not legal. Neither is assault. You want to talk about legal? Marcus moved closer, and there was something dangerous in his eyes now. I've been thinking about every call we went on together, every traffic stop, every arrest. How many times did I look the other way? How many times did I tell myself you were just having a bad day, just stressed, just doing your job? Marcus, I enabled you. We all did. And now I have to live with that. I have to look in the mirror and know that every time you hurt someone, I could have stopped it. Should have stopped it. Marcus's voice cracked. My daughter asked me yesterday if I was a bad cop like you. She's 12 years old and she asked me if I hurt people for fun. Kyle couldn't meet his eyes. I didn't do it for fun. Then why her? She was just standing there. She was... Kyle searched for the words. She was too calm, too confident, like she was mocking me, like she thought she was better than me. Jesus Christ, Kyle. You hear yourself. Marcus backed toward the door. You assaulted someone because they stood still, because they didn't show you the fear you thought you deserved. That's not policing. That's terrorism. Get out. Gladly. But Kyle. One more thing. Marcus paused at the door. That woman you hit, I looked into her. Really looked. Called some buddies in federal law enforcement. You know what they told me? They told me to pray. They said I should get down on my knees and pray that she decides to let this go. Because if she doesn't, if she decides to really come after you, there won't be anything left when she's done. Is that a threat? It's a warning. From people who know what she's capable of. Marcus left the door clicking shut with a finality that sounded like a coffin closing. Kyle stood in his ruined apartment and felt the walls closing in. He needed air, needed to move, needed to do something before he lost his mind completely. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door, then stopped. Where would he go? Every place he'd ever felt comfortable was now enemy territory. The precinct, the bar where cops hung out, the gym, his brother's house, his wife's sister's place where his daughter was staying. All of it closed to him now. There was only one place left. One person who could end this, who could make it stop. Alisa Monroe. At the community center, the morning reading group had swelled to twice its normal size. Parents who'd never attended before were bringing their children, wanting them to see the woman who'd stood still while the world fell apart around her. Wanting them to witness something they couldn't quite name but knew was important. Alisa sat in her chair, the bruise on her face now a sickly yellow-green, reading from a book about a small seed that grew into a mighty tree. The children listened with unusual intensity, sensing something significant in the simple story. Margaret watched from the back, arms crossed. The center had been flooded with donations in the last week. Money, books, supplies. People wanted to be part of whatever this was, wanted to support the place that had produced someone like Alisa Monroe. But Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that they were all standing on the edge of something, that the story wasn't over yet, that the calm was just the eye of the storm. Alisa finished reading and closed the book. What did we learn? She asked the children. That small things can grow big, Keisha said. That you gotta be patient, Deshawn added. That the seed had to break open before it could grow, a quiet girl named Maya said. It had to let itself break. Alisa looked at Maya with something like recognition. Yes, sometimes breaking is the only way to become what you're meant to be. Outside, a car pulled up too fast, tires squealing. Margaret's head snapped toward the window. A man was getting out, moving quickly, his body language all wrong, aggressive, desperate. Everyone stay here, Margaret said, moving toward the door. But Alisa had already seen. She stood slowly, setting the book down with careful precision. That's him, someone whispered. That's the cop. The room went silent. Every adult in the space moved instinctively to shield the children, creating a human barrier between them and the door. Kyle burst through the entrance, wild-eyed and unshaven, and the smell of him sweat and desperation and something rotten underneath filled the room instantly. Where is she? His voice was raw. Where's Alisa Monroe? Margaret stepped forward, positioning herself between Kyle and the reading area. You need to leave, now, before I call the police. Kyle's laugh was unhinged. I am the police. Not anymore, you're not. This from Mrs. Patterson, who'd appeared from the kitchen. We all saw the news. You've been fired. You ain't nothing now. I just need to talk to her. 5 minutes, that's all. I need to explain. Explain what? Alisa's voice cut through the room. She stepped out from behind Margaret, and Kyle saw her fully for the first time since the punch. The bruise, the split lip that was still healing, the calm, terrible eyes that had haunted his nightmares. You, Kyle breathed. We need to nothing, Alisa said quietly. You came here on your own. Whatever you have to say, say it. But these children stay. These people stay. You don't get privacy. You don't get comfort. You want to talk. Kyle's hands were shaking. He'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head. The apology he'd crafted. The explanation. The plea for understanding. But standing here facing her, all of it evaporated. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I'm so fucking sorry. I don't know why I did it." "Yes, you do," Alisa said. "You did it because you could. Because you've done it before and nothing happened. Because the system protected you, and the union defended you, and the city paid people to be quiet. You did it because somewhere deep down, you believe some people deserve to be hurt." "No, I'm not. I'm not a racist. I'm not a bad person." "Then what are you?" The question hung in the air. Kyle's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "You know what I think?" Alisa took a step forward. Kyle flinched back. "I think you're a man who spent so long hiding from himself that you forgot what you really are. And now, for the first time in your life, you're being forced to look. To really look. And you can't stand what you see. Please." Kyle's voice broke. "I've lost everything. My job, my family, my reputation. Isn't that enough? Haven't I suffered enough?" "Suffered." Mrs. Patterson's voice was sharp. "Boy, you ain't even begun to suffer. You spent 10 years hurting people and you lost your job. That ain't suffering. That's consequences finally catching up to your sins." "I have a daughter." Kyle was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "She thinks I'm a monster. My own daughter is afraid of me." "Good," Alisa said softly. "Maybe that fear will protect her from becoming you." The words hit Kyle like a physical blow. He stumbled back, hitting the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor. The children watched in fascinated horror as this grown man fell apart in front of them. "What do you want from me?" Kyle sobbed. "What do I have to do to make this stop?" "Nothing," Alisa said. "There's nothing you can do, because this isn't about you anymore. You were just the catalyst, the crack in the dam, and now the water is coming through and it won't stop until everything rotten is washed away." "I'll kill myself," Kyle said suddenly. "Is that what you want, will that make you happy?" The room went cold. Alisa moved closer, crouched down so she was eye level with Kyle. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, almost kind. "Kyle, I don't want you dead. I want you awake. I want you to feel every moment of this. I want you to understand, really understand what you did, not just to me, to everyone. All those people you heard over the years, all those complaints you dismissed, all that pain you caused because you could. I can't. You can. You will. Because the alternative, checking out, ending it, that's the easy way. And you don't get the easy way anymore." Alisa stood. "You're going to live with this. You're going to wake up every day and remember what you did. And maybe, if you're very lucky and you work very hard someday, you'll become someone worth being." She turned and walked back to the children, picked up the book, and continued reading as if Kyle wasn't even there. Kyle sat on the floor broken while the story of the seed that had to break open to grow continued around him. Eventually, 2 uniformed officers arrived. Younger guys, faces grim, and helped him to his feet. "Come on, Brener," one of them said quietly. "Let's get you out of here." "Am I under arrest?" "No, but you're gonna be if you don't leave voluntarily. That's trespassing, harassment, take your pick." They escorted him out. The children watched him go, their young faces processing something they'd remember for the rest of their lives. The sight of power reduced to nothing, of authority revealed as hollow, of a man who'd built his identity on fear, discovering that fear works both ways. When the door closed, Alisa kept reading. Her voice never wavered. But Margaret noticed her hands. They were shaking slightly, the only sign that the encounter had affected her at all. After reading time ended, and the children were dismissed to other activities, Margaret pulled Alisa aside. "That was dangerous. He could have been armed. Could have hurt you or the kids." "He wasn't armed, and he wasn't going to hurt anyone but himself." "How did you know?" "Because I've seen men like Kyle Brener in their final stage before. In interrogation rooms, in compounds after sieges, in the moments when they finally realize the game is over, and they lost." Alisa's voice was distant. "They don't lash out anymore. They collapse inward. All that rage turns to self-pity. All that violence turns to tears. It's almost sad if you can forget everything they did to get to that point." "Almost sad," Margaret repeated. "But not quite. Not quite." Across town, in a conference room at City Hall, an emergency session was underway. The mayor, the city council, the police chief, the DA, and representatives from the Justice Department were all present. The tension was suffocating. 18 officers. The Justice Department representative said, her voice clipped and professional. 18 officers with similar complaint patterns to Brener. All still employed, all still armed, all still patrolling. This is a systemic problem, not an individual failure. Mayor Thompson rubbed his temples. "We're implementing reforms, new training protocols, body camera requirements." "You've promised reforms before," the rep interrupted. "After the Martinez shooting, after the Henderson case, after every single incident that made national news. And yet, here we are again. Another video, another hashtag, another promise of change that means nothing. That's not fair." What's not fair is $4 million in taxpayer money used to cover up abuse. What's not fair is a decade of documented misconduct that was ignored until it became unavoidable. What's not fair, Mayor Thompson, is that it took a woman getting punched in the face on camera for you to finally admit there's a problem. Chief Harrison cleared his throat. "We're prepared to offer our full cooperation with any federal investigation." "Oh, there will be an investigation, but that's not all." The rep pulled out a thick folder. "The Justice Department is prepared to file a consent decree, federal oversight of your entire department, every policy, every hire, every disciplinary decision. You'll report to us for the next 5 years minimum." The room erupted, council members shouting objections, the police chief going red in the face, the mayor looking like he might have a stroke. "You can't do that." "We absolutely can, and we will, unless—" The rep held up a hand waiting for silence. "Unless you demonstrate immediate comprehensive action, mass terminations, policy overhauls, community oversight boards with actual authority, not promises. Action, starting today." "That's impossible," Harrison said. "The union will fight us on every termination. It'll take years. Then it'll take years. But it starts now, today, or we come in and do it for you, and trust me, you won't like our methods." Mayor Thompson looked at the faces around the table, saw the fear, the anger, the resignation. They'd run out of ways to avoid this. "Fine," he said quietly. "We'll start with Brener. Immediate termination, no appeal." "Brenner's already done," the rep said. "I want the other 18, and I want a full audit of every use of force incident in the last 10 years, every complaint, every settlement, everything." "That's non-negotiable. You have 48 hours to begin implementation, or we file the consent decree. Your choice." She left the door closing with a finality that sounded like a gavel. Harrison slumped in his chair. "This is the end of the department as we know it." "Maybe it should be," the DA said quietly. "Maybe that's the point." That evening, the news broke. Not just about the consent decree threat, about everything. The 18 officers being investigated, the audit, the systematic nature of the abuse, and at the center of it all, one image that had become iconic: Alisa Monroe, blood on her lip, looking at the camera with those calm, devastating eyes. The internet exploded with a new hashtag Monroe Effect. Students at Georgetown University organized a panel discussion on nonviolent resistance using Alisa as a case study. A professor at Yale published an essay titled "The Power of Presence: How Standing Still Became Revolutionary." Artists started creating murals showing Alisa's face, her bruise rendered in bold colors, her eyes staring out at passers-by. But Alisa herself remained invisible. She didn't give interviews, didn't make statements, didn't attend any of the rallies being organized in her name. She just continued her routine, volunteering at the center, reading to children, helping Mrs. Patterson with community meals, being ordinary while the world decided she was extraordinary. Rebecca Lynn watched it all unfold from a safe house the Phoenix program had arranged for her. 3 rooms in a nondescript building, guards she never saw but knew were there. Dr. Park visited every few days to check on her, to answer questions, to slowly reveal the world Rebecca had accidentally stumbled into. "She's not fighting back," Rebecca said during one of these visits. "Everyone's making her this symbol of resistance, but she's not actually doing anything." "That's the genius of it," Park replied. "She doesn't need to do anything. She already did the only thing that mattered. She stood still. Everything else is just dominoes falling." But for how long? When does it end? When the system finishes eating itself, when every rotten piece has been exposed and removed, when people finally understand that violence isn't strength, silence is. Park smiled slightly. Monroe learned something in the field that most agents never grasp. The best weapon isn't a gun or a bomb. It's patience. The willingness to stand in the fire and not flinch, because eventually the fire burns out. But the person who stood in it, they become legend. Is that what she wants, to be a legend? I don't think she wants anything except for the truth to come out. Everything else, the fame, the symbolism, the social movement, that's just what happens when you crack open a system that's been built on lies. Rebecca thought about this. What happens to her when it's over, when the dominoes stop falling? Park's expression darkened. That's what worries me. Because people like Monroe, people who've seen what she's seen, done what she's done, they don't retire peacefully. They either die in the field, or they die trying to leave it. And Monroe left, which means she's either incredibly strong or incredibly broken. Maybe both. You think she's suicidal? I think she's someone who's carried too much darkness for too long. And sometimes when you finally stop running, when you finally stand still, that's when the darkness catches up. Park stood to leave. "Keep monitoring the situation. Let me know if anything changes." Like what? Like if Brener does something desperate. Like if Monroe's cover gets fully blown. Like if any of 100 different things go wrong. Park paused at the door. "This is a controlled burn, Rebecca. But controlled burns can still get out of hand." In his empty apartment, Kyle Brener sat in the dark and stared at his service weapon. He'd been ordered to turn it in, but he'd kept a backup. His throwaway piece. The gun he'd never registered, never reported, kept hidden for emergencies. This felt like an emergency. The news was playing on loop, showing his face, showing the video, showing expert after expert dissecting his life and finding it wanting. A psychologist speculated about his childhood. A sociologist connected him to broader patterns of systemic abuse. A civil rights attorney called him a perfect specimen of institutional racism. A perfect specimen. Like he was a bug pinned to a board for study. The gun was heavy in his hands. He'd cleaned it earlier, muscle memory taking over. Loaded it. Pressed it against his temple just to feel the cold metal. It would be so easy. One squeeze, 1 second of pain, and then nothing. No more shame. No more seeing his face on every screen. No more knowing his daughter was somewhere being told her father was a monster. But Alisa's words kept echoing in his head. "You don't get the easy way anymore." Kyle lowered the gun. Not because he wanted to live, but because dying felt like letting her win. Like proving her right. like admitting that he was exactly what everyone said he was: weak, cowardly, incapable of facing consequences. He set the gun on the table and picked up his laptop instead. Opened it. Started typing. An essay. A confession. A full accounting of every person he'd hurt, every complaint he'd buried, every abuse of power he'd committed. Not because he was noble, not because he was seeking redemption, but because if he was going to be destroyed, he was going to make sure everyone understood exactly how rotten the system that created him really was. If he was going down, he was taking them all with him. He typed through the night, his fingers flying over the keys, years of suppressed truth pouring out in a flood that couldn't be stopped. And with each word he felt something shifting inside him. Not redemption, not forgiveness. But maybe, just maybe, the first crack in the shell of lies he'd built his entire life around. The seed that had to break open to grow. Miles away, Alisa Monroe woke from a nightmare about Kandahar, about children caught in crossfire, about choices that seemed right in the moment but echoed through years with the sound of screaming. She sat up, sweat cooling on her skin, and touched her bruised face. Still tender. Still a reminder. Her phone showed a message from Director Walsh Brenner's, writing a tell-all. Full confession. Names, dates, everything. It's going to destroy what's left of MPD. Still think you know what you're doing, Alisa typed back. Yes. People are going to get hurt. Good people. Cops who were just trying to do their jobs. Then they should have stopped the bad ones. Silence is complicity, sir. You taught me that. A long pause. Then, you've changed. No, sir. I finally stopped changing. I finally became what I was always meant to be. Which is... Alisa looked at her reflection in the dark window. Saw the bruise. Saw the calm eyes. Saw something she'd been running from her entire career. A mirror, she typed. I just hold still and let people see themselves clearly. Whatever happens after that is their choice. She turned off the phone and lay back down, knowing sleep wouldn't come, but willing to wait in the darkness until dawn. Because patience was her weapon now. And the war was just beginning. Kyle's confession posted at 4:47 a.m. He'd uploaded it to a blog platform, a Google Doc, set to public, sent it to every journalist whose email he could find, and posted links across social media before anyone could stop him. 23 pages of single-spaced truth. Every excessive force incident. Every complaint he'd buried. Every time the system had protected him when it should have prosecuted him. And more, the names of supervisors who'd covered for him. The union lawyers who'd coached him on lying. The internal affairs investigators who'd looked the other way. He didn't soften anything. Didn't make excuses. Just laid it all out like evidence at a crime scene, methodical and damning. By 6 a.m., it had been downloaded 50,000 times. By 8 a.m., every major news network was running excerpts. By noon, the police commissioner had resigned. 3 city council members had called for impeachment proceedings against the mayor, and the Department of Justice had accelerated their timeline for federal intervention. The dominoes weren't just falling anymore. They were collapsing in an avalanche. Chief Harrison sat in his office, the resignation letter already typed on his computer, his hand hovering over the send button. Lieutenant Chen stood in the doorway, her face ashen. "It's worse than we thought," she said quietly. Brener named 47 officers, not 18, 47, with specific incidents, dates, witnesses. He kept records. All these years he was keeping records. Why? Harrison's voice was hoarse. Why would he document his own crimes? Insurance maybe, or paranoia. Or maybe some part of him knew this day would come. Chen moved into the office, closed the door. "Ray, we have to make a choice. We can go down with the ship, or we can help sink it ourselves and maybe save something worth saving." "There's nothing left to save. There's the good cops, the ones who tried to do right, the ones who filed complaints that went nowhere. We owe them the truth." Harrison looked at her for a long moment. "You knew about some of this. You tried to tell me. I tried. And I didn't listen." He hit send on the resignation letter. Well, I'm listening now. At Grant Heights Community Center, Alisa arrived to find media vans camped outside. Reporters saw her surged forward with microphones and cameras and shouted questions that blended into white noise. Ms. Monroe, have you read Detective Brener's confession? Do you feel vindicated? Will you be filing charges now? Are you CIA? Is this a government operation? Alisa walked through them like they were ghosts, didn't acknowledge a single question, just moved steadily toward the center's entrance where Mrs. Patterson stood guard like a lioness protecting her den. Get back, Mrs. Patterson shouted at the reporters. This is private property. Y'all want a story. Go read that man's confession. Leave this woman alone. Inside the center was packed, not just with the usual volunteers and children, but with people from across the city. People who'd seen the videos, read the confession, wanted to be part of whatever this moment was. Margaret pulled Alisa aside. This is getting out of control. We're not equipped for this kind of attention. I know, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just tell me, is it over? Did you get what you wanted? Alisa looked out at the crowd, saw faces of every age, every color united by something fragile and powerful. Hope, maybe. Or just the desperate belief that change was possible. It's not about what I wanted, Alisa said. It was never about me. Then what was it about? Showing people what happens when one person refuses to be silent. When one person stands still and says no more. The ripples from that, they go further than any violence ever could. Before Margaret could respond, a commotion outside made everyone turn. Through the windows, they could see a black SUV pulling up. Federal plates. 3 people emerged, moving with the careful precision of agents. Dr. Park entered first, her expression unreadable. Behind her came 2 men in dark suits who positioned themselves by the door. The crowd quieted instantly, sensing authority. Park's eyes found Alisa. Ms. Monroe, we need to talk. Privately. Anything you say to her, you can say in front of us. Mrs. Patterson declared, moving to stand beside Alisa. Ma'am, this is a matter of national security. I don't care if it's a matter of planetary security. This woman is part of our community. We don't let our own stand alone. Park looked around at the faces, determined, protective, unwilling to budge. She smiled slightly. All right, have it your way. She turned to Alisa. Director Walsh has ordered your immediate return to Langley. Protective custody. The situation has escalated beyond acceptable parameters. I'm not going, Alisa said calmly. It's not a request. I don't work for the agency anymore. I resigned. That means I get to make my own choices. Monroe, listen to me. Park's voice dropped, became almost pleading. Brener's confession mentioned classified operations. He didn't have details, but he suspected. And now Congress is asking questions. Senator Michaels is demanding to know who you really are, what your clearance level is, whether this whole thing was a sanctioned operation. If we don't bring you in, if we can't control the narrative. Then let them ask, Alisa interrupted. Let them investigate. Let them expose every classified program that was used to train people like me to do things that would horrify the public. Maybe it's time for that truth too. The room went silent. Even the children seemed to understand they were witnessing something historic. Park's face went hard. You're willing to burn the entire intelligence community, compromise ongoing operations, get people killed. I'm not going to leak classified information, but I'm also not going to be silenced anymore. If Congress wants to investigate, that's their right. If the public wants answers about what their government does in the shadows, they deserve them. I'm done protecting systems that protect themselves by destroying people. One of the agents by the door stepped forward. Dr. Park, we have authorization to... Stand down, Park said quietly. She studied Alisa's face for a long moment. You've changed. The Monroe I knew 6 months ago would never have defied a direct order. The Monroe you knew 6 months ago was still running. I'm done running. Park pulled out her phone typed something, waited. Her phone buzzed with a response. She read it, her expression shifting from frustration to something like grudging respect. Director Walsh says, and I quote, "If Monroe wants to burn it all down, let her. Maybe we deserve it." Park pocketed her phone. "You win. But Monroe." When this is over, when the dust settles, and you realize what you've unleashed, don't come crying to us for protection. I won't need to. I have all the protection I need right here. Alisa gestured to the crowd around her. These people, this community, that's stronger than any federal program. Park left her agents following. The door closed and the room erupted in confused chatter. But Mrs. Patterson raised her hand for silence. "I don't know what half of that meant," she said loudly. "But I know this. We got a woman here who stood up to the police, stood up to the government, stood up to everyone who said she should be quiet and small and afraid. And she did it without firing a shot, without hurting anyone, just by standing still and being brave." Her voice grew stronger. "So I don't care what alphabet agencies she used to work for. I care that she's here now, and we protect our own." The crowd roared agreement, and Alisa, for the first time since this all began, felt tears prick her eyes. Across the city, Kyle Brener sat in a holding cell at the federal building. Not arrested, not yet, but voluntarily cooperating with the Justice Department's investigation. The cell was clean, comfortable even. Nothing like the holding cells he'd thrown people into over the years. But it felt like a tomb anyway. A lawyer the public defender's office had assigned him sat across the table looking overwhelmed. "Mr. Brener, you understand that by posting that confession, you've essentially convicted yourself of multiple felonies, assault, civil rights violations, conspiracy to obstruct justice. I know what I did." "Then why confess to everything? You had options. The union could have negotiated." "The union dropped me. Everyone dropped me." Kyle's voice was flat, dead. "And you know what they should have. Years ago, I was a disease in that department. We all were. And nobody had the guts to cut us out." "That's not look. Self-flagellation doesn't help your case." "I don't want help. I want accountability. Real accountability. Not a settlement. Not a plea deal. I want to stand in front of a judge and a jury and everyone I hurt, and I want them to see me for what I am." The lawyer stared at him. "You're serious?" "For the first time in my life, yeah, I'm serious." Kyle leaned forward. "You know what that woman did to me, Alisa Monroe?" She held up a mirror. "And I finally saw what everyone else has been seeing for years. A bully, a coward, a racist who convinced himself he was just doing his job." His voice cracked. "My daughter is 8 years old, and she's afraid of me. She's afraid of her own father because I taught her that violence is how you solve problems. That might makes right. That some people matter less than others. Mr. Brener, I can't undo what I've done. Can't give back the years I stole from people. Can't heal the trauma I caused. But I can tell the truth. All of it. No matter what it costs me. Maybe that's the only thing left that matters." The lawyer closed his briefcase. "All right. Then let's make sure your truth actually changes something." By evening, the city was on fire with protests. Not violent ones, peaceful vigils, organized marches, community gatherings. But everywhere the same message. No more silence. No more covering up. No more protecting systems that destroy people. At a press conference, the mayor stood beside the new interim police chief, a black woman named Sharon Torres, who'd spent 20 years trying to reform the department from within and announced sweeping changes. Immediate termination of the 47 officers named in Brener's confession. Independent civilian review board with subpoena power. Mandatory body cameras with footage automatically uploaded to public servers. Elimination of qualified immunity for officers with sustained complaints. The police union president tried to object, but his microphone was cut. The crowd drowned him out with chants of, "Monroe effect, Monroe effect." Alisa watched it all on the small TV in Margaret's office at the community center. She'd refused all interview requests, all speaking engagements, all opportunities to capitalize on her sudden fame. She just wanted to be left alone to do the work she'd come here to do. "You could have anything right now," Margaret said, sitting beside her. "Book deals, speaking tours, a platform to change national policy, and you're hiding in my office eating leftover casserole." "I'm not hiding. I'm exactly where I want to be." "Why, help me understand. You toppled an entire police department, exposed systemic corruption, became a symbol for a movement. Why aren't you out there leading it?" Alisa was quiet for a long moment, watching footage of crowds chanting her name. "Because movements don't need leaders. They need catalysts. And once the reaction starts, the catalyst steps back and lets the chemistry do its work. If I become the face of this, if I become the leader, then it's about me, my personality, my decisions, my failures. But if I disappear, then it's about the idea, the principle, the truth that one person standing still can change everything." That's very philosophical, also very lonely. "I've been lonely before. I can handle it." Margaret put her hand over Alisa's. "You don't have to be. You've got a whole community here that loves you. For now. Until they find out who I really am. What I really did in those years before I came here. Were you a good person doing bad things or a bad person doing necessary things?" "I don't know. Maybe there's no difference." Alisa's voice was barely a whisper. "I've killed people, Margaret. 27 confirmed. Probably more I don't know about. Drone strikes, targeted operations, all sanctioned, all legal according to some classified memo. But when I close my eyes, I still see their faces. Still wonder if they had children. If someone somewhere is holding a vigil for them." Margaret didn't let go of her hand. "And you came here to atone. I came here to remember what it feels like to build something instead of destroying it. To protect people instead of eliminating them. To stand for something instead of just standing against." Alisa wiped her eyes. "I don't know if it's working, but it's all I have left to try." 3 weeks later, the trials began. Kyle Brener was first. He'd waived his right to a jury trial, choosing instead to plead guilty to all charges and make a statement before sentencing. The courtroom was packed. Victims, reporters, activists, curious citizens who wanted to see what justice looked like when the system actually worked. Alisa attended, sitting in the back row, her face now healed except for a small scar on her lip that would never quite disappear. Kyle saw her as he entered. Their eyes met. And for just a second, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not understanding, but maybe recognition. Two people who'd both been weapons in different ways, both trying to figure out how to be human again. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Martha Thornton, read through the charges. 15 counts of assault, 7 counts of civil rights violations, 3 counts of conspiracy to obstruct justice. The maximum sentence could be 30 years. "Mr. Brener," Judge Thornton said, "you have the opportunity to make a statement before sentencing. Do you wish to do so?" Kyle stood. His lawyer had written something for him, but he left it on the table. Instead, he spoke from memory, from the heart, from the broken place inside him that had finally cracked open. "Your Honor, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did, what I spent years doing, was inexcusable. I hurt people because I could, because the system protected me, because I convinced myself that some people mattered less than others." His voice shook but didn't break. "But I want everyone here to know something. I'm not the disease. I'm a symptom. There are hundreds of cops just like me still working, still hurting people, still hiding behind badges and qualified immunity, and a union that values loyalty over justice. My confession named 47 officers. That's not even half of them. That's not even close." The courtroom erupted. Judge Thornton's gavel cracked down. "Order, Mr. Brener. Unless you want to be held in contempt." "I don't care about contempt, Your Honor. I care about the truth." Kyle turned to face the gallery, facing the cameras, facing the world. Every person I named in my confession, investigate them. Don't just fire them. Investigate. Pull their records. Talk to their victims. Follow the money trail on the settlements. Because what you'll find is a machine designed to protect itself by sacrificing the people it's supposed to serve. And that machine won't stop until someone breaks it completely. He sat down. The courtroom was chaos, and Alisa in the back row smiled slightly. The seed was growing. Judge Thornton sentenced Kyle to 15 years with possibility of parole after 8. Not as harsh as it could have been given his cooperation, but harsh enough to send a message. The courtroom divided, some people cheering, some shouting it wasn't enough, some crying for reasons they couldn't quite articulate. As Kyle was led away, he looked back one more time, found Alisa in the crowd, mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." She didn't respond, just watched him go, her face unreadable. Outside, reporters swarmed, but Alisa had learned the secret passages through the federal building from her Phoenix days. She slipped out a side entrance and was 3 blocks away before anyone noticed she was gone. Mrs. Patterson was waiting at the agreed-upon corner in her ancient Buick. Alisa slid into the passenger seat, and they drove in silence for a while. 15 years, Mrs. Patterson finally said. That enough for you? It's not about what's enough for me. It's about whether he uses those 15 years to actually change or just to feel sorry for himself. You think he can change, really change. I've seen warlords become peacemakers, seen soldiers become humanitarians, seen people who did unspeakable things find redemption. Alisa stared out the window at the city rolling past. So yes, I think Kyle Brener can change. Whether he will, that's up to him. They drove back to Grant Heights, where the community was planning a celebration. Not of revenge, not of punishment, but of the truth finally, after so long, coming into the light. 6 months later, the changes had crystallized into something permanent. The Department of Justice's consent decree was in full effect. The Civilian Review Board had fired 20 more officers and disciplined 50 others. The new police training program required de-escalation training, implicit bias work, and community partnership sessions. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to perfect. But it was different. The culture was shifting. Rebecca Lynn had accepted the Phoenix program's offer. She was in training now, learning to be the kind of analyst who could see patterns before they became disasters. She visited Alisa once a month, bringing updates from the world of classified operations that Alisa had left behind. They're calling what you did the Monroe Doctrine, Rebecca said during one visit, sitting in Alisa's small apartment with tea and cookies Mrs. Patterson had made. New protocol for operators who want to transition out. Instead of just disappearing them or sending them to therapy, they're being embedded in communities, becoming the kind of quiet force for good that you became. I'm not sure I'm a force for anything except stubbornness, Alisa said. You changed an entire city. You exposed corruption that went back decades. You started a national conversation about policing and accountability. You did all that by getting punched in the face and then standing still. Rebecca shook her head in wonder. Do you understand how rare that is? How hard most people's first instinct is to hit back or run away? You did neither. I'd been hitting back my whole career. It never fixed anything, just created more violence, more trauma, more graves. Alisa sipped her tea. Standing still was the scariest thing I'd ever done, because it meant trusting that the truth would be enough, that I didn't need to force change, just create the space for it to happen. And now, what's next? Now I keep reading to children, keep helping Mrs. Patterson with community meals, keep being a small, quiet part of this neighborhood. Alisa smiled. Turns out that's harder than overthrowing governments. But it's also more real. Rebecca left, and Alisa sat alone in her apartment as evening fell over Grant Heights. Below her window, the neighborhood was alive with the sounds of families eating dinner, children playing, people calling greetings to neighbors. Ordinary sounds. Beautiful sounds. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Kyle Brener had been granted early access to a prison education program. He was studying social work planning to counsel at-risk youth when he was released. Maybe he would actually change. Maybe he'd find redemption. Or maybe he'd just become better at hiding who he really was. Either way, it wasn't Alisa's concern anymore. She'd done what she came to Grant Heights to do. She'd planted a seed, stood still while it grew, and now the tree was strong enough to weather storms on its own. The next morning, Deshaun arrived at the community center for reading time. He was wearing a t-shirt his mother had made, a simple design showing an eye and the words, "Stand still, stand strong," underneath. "Ms. Monroe, look." He showed her proudly. "My mama made it. She says what you did, not fighting back, that's real strength." Alisa pulled him into a hug. "Your mama's a wise woman. Are you gonna leave?" The question came from Keisha, who'd been quiet all morning. "Everyone's saying you're gonna go away now that everything's over." Alisa looked around at all the children's faces. These kids who'd watched her stand still through chaos, who'd learned that courage came in different forms, who'd seen that change was possible if you were patient enough and brave enough to endure. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "This is my home now. You're my family. And families don't abandon each other." The children cheered. And Alisa picked up the book they'd been reading, still the same story about the seed that had to break open to grow. Some stories were worth repeating, worth remembering, worth passing down to the next generation who would need them when their own time came to stand still and choose truth over violence. As Alisa read, her voice steady and warm, Margaret watched from the doorway and thought about miracles. Not the flashy kind, not the dramatic interventions from heaven, but the quiet kind. The kind that happened when one person decided to stop running, to stop fighting, to just stand perfectly still and let the light shine through them. The kind of miracle that started with a single punch and ended with an entire city learning to see itself clearly. Outside, a news van was packing up. The Monroe effect had become old news, replaced by other stories, other scandals, other viral moments. But in Grant Heights, in the hearts of people who'd witnessed transformation firsthand, the effect remained. In school classrooms where teachers used Alisa's story to teach about civil rights. In police academies where recruits studied what went wrong and how to prevent it. In therapy sessions where victims of police violence finally felt heard. In a prison cell where Kyle Brener sat writing letters to the people he'd hurt, knowing most would never respond, but writing anyway because it was the only thing left he could do. In a federal building where Rebecca Lynn analyzed patterns, looking for the next Kyle Brener before he could hurt anyone. In living rooms across the country where parents told their children that violence wasn't the only answer. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stand perfectly still and refuse to become what hurt you. The Monroe effect wasn't about one woman. It had never been about one woman. It was about what happened when someone cared more about truth than triumph, more about justice than revenge, more about healing than winning. It was about the power of presence, the strength of stillness, the devastating force of absolute unwavering calm in the face of chaos. And as Alisa read to the children about seeds and growth and the beautiful necessity of breaking open, she knew that her work, her real work, was just beginning. Not as a Phoenix operative, not as a symbol or a hero or a martyr, just as Alisa Monroe, community volunteer, storyteller, mirror, the woman who stood still and changed everything. The children listened, wrapped and safe, and learning lessons that would echo through their lives. And outside, Grant Heights continued its slow, steady transformation from a neighborhood that had learned to expect abuse into a community that demanded better. That believed better was possible. Because they'd seen it happen, witnessed it with their own eyes. One punch, one woman, one choice to stand still instead of fighting back. And everything, absolutely everything, had changed. In the end, that was the real Monroe effect. Not the policies or the protests or the prison sentences, but the quiet understanding that each person had the power to be a catalyst, to stand in their truth and let the ripples spread. Some people would remember Alisa Monroe's bruised face. Some would remember the viral video. Some would remember the confession that brought down a police department. But the children would remember her voice reading stories in a sunny room, teaching them that the greatest superpower wasn't strength or speed or invulnerability. It was the courage to stand perfectly still while the world tried to break you. And the faith that standing still was enough. That truth was enough. That they were enough. And in a world that constantly told them to fight or flee, to rage, or submit to be less than they were, or more than they could sustain, that lesson was everything. Alisa closed the book. The story was over. But its echoes would continue spreading outward in waves that would touch lives she'd never meet, change systems she'd never see, plant seeds in soil she'd never tend. That was the real power of standing still. Not what you did in the moment, but what the moment did long after you'd moved on.